I'm going to call to order the September the 7th, 2010 work session for the Board of County Commissioners. We have before us the agenda that we have, and before we get started, I do want to call everyone's attention. Well, Commissioner Poole has a meeting that after work that she will be here. I think she says that she's going to be here around 4 o'clock or 4:30. I don't remember what the time was, but she will get here. She got tied up in a meeting at work. And the second is Mr. Day is tied up in another meeting and is coming, so he'll probably be here no later than 4 o'clock as well as my suspicion. In any event, we do have the agenda before us. If there's anything that stands out that we need to change, if you'll look at it right now and let me know. Otherwise, at least set the agenda as it is right now, and or we can just set the agenda as it is. Is there anything that we want to add that we don't have on here right now? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it's presented?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. The next is, well, everybody will look to the consent agenda because we specifically, unless there's something that needs to be pulled off, we can transfer this to the September the 20th consent agenda. If you everybody will take a moment to look at that to see if there's anything that you do not want to go on the consent agenda. We have a motion to place the items that are on the consent agenda today to the September the 20th consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. First business that we will be conducting today is G1, which is found on page 231 of our agenda, and that will be the report from Piedmont Natural Gas on the proposed gas line. At this time, I call on Mr. Mike Downs for the presentation, and if there's anybody else that has I believe there's some presentation, if you'll come forward.
That's correct. Yeah, well, we have several people from Piedmont Natural Gas here. Ms. Marty Visors, is there public relations, governmental relations?
Community relations.
Community relations, okay.
All both.
All right, and she's got two fine assistants here to help her make this presentation to you. They've got a gas line proposed to come through the county in the area near the Cox Mill Elementary and the Cox Mill High School. They've had one short public meeting out at the Embassy Suites a couple weeks back, and we've asked them to come in and speak to you as a whole to give you sort of an update so you know exactly why the line is going in, where is it going, what's it going to serve, and then why they're selecting this location. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you very much. I'm George Baldwin, in Legislative and Community Affairs at Piedmont. And thank you for the time on the agenda this afternoon. This is a follow-up to the August 17th public meeting, as Mike just stated, where we presented the project and learned some information about the route, the preliminary route that we proposed. So we've been asked today to come provide an update on that planning process. We've owned and operated a pipeline in Cabarrus County for over 50 years. And the infrastructure needs to be upgraded because of growth in the state and growth in the region. I'm going to turn the program over to Adam Long, who is one of the project managers in charge of the project, to provide you some maps and provide you some information on the planning.
Thank you, George. This project main purpose is to move gas from the Iredell County Williams pipelines to eastern North Carolina to serve our customers. The map just handed out, there are two maps. The top map, shaded in yellow, is our existing pipeline corridor. Piedmont initially looked at using this existing pipeline corridor for this expansion. The expansion consists of one 20-inch pipeline between Iredell County and our Concord compressor station near the airport. After initially talking to the public and looking at this route, Piedmont got some very quick feedback that there were many obstacles in the way. We knew there were some. We did not know the extent of it until we sent out letters, and what we found out is there were many developments, many new structures, homes, neighborhoods, community centers in the way. The second page of the handout in red shows an alternate path Piedmont is looking at. And what this path does is routes around many of the issues that we found with neighborhoods, homes, community centers, and schools. What this shows for Cabarrus County in the bottom right-hand corner is we're coming off of our existing pipeline right-of-way and going around both the elementary and the high school in Mecklenburg County off Cox Elementary School Road. This is our preferred route, the one we would like to go to. We believe it is the smallest impact to the community and is better for everyone involved. During the process of this project, we will survey through the elementary school to document any issues there as far as the proposed expansion goes and its relative distance to any buildings or structures. But our preferred path forward at this time is to go around the schools completely.
Are there any questions? The proposed is the red one, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How do you notify the homeowners of y'all's intentions that one may not have gas, or, how do you notify them to let them know what's going on?
Our survey company, McKim & Creed, looks in county records for all of the landowners, and we send out a letter 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time notifying the landowner that they are in the proposed area of a potential pipeline. And what we say is that they may not be impacted, but just to be sure, we're asking for permission to access their property to survey to see if they're one of the properties impacted or if there's a structure or area that is not potentially good for construction on their property.
And although it's a wide swath, the red line that you have is I don't know what the,
It's about 300 feet on either side of the center, so it's a 600-foot wide area.
okay. Can you talk about the safety of a pipeline going so near not only homes, but also schools, elementary? Actually, this would be more the high school if the
Correct,
way
they
it
go to
looks.
the north side of the existing high school.
Can you tell me about the safety or about the school?
Yes, what Piedmont Natural Gas does, since we're regulated by the North Carolina Utility Commission, is we follow all the federal guidelines set out by the Department of Transportation for natural gas pipeline. And what the federal requirements state is we have to count the number of houses and the type of structures near the pipeline and add an additional safety factor. So you'll lower the pressure, increase the strength of the pipe to account for any issues that may arise. What this does is make the pipeline extremely safe so that under normal operating conditions or even adverse operating conditions, the potential to impact the community or any near structures is very small.
Okay. Commissioner Minot?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I used to be on the school board, so I remember when the elementary school was built and the gas line, the current gas line goes through that property.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, if the current gas line goes through that property, why is there a necessity to go outside of that area to put the new one? Can they not be put side by side in the same area?
They could be. Piedmont's understanding, without doing our survey right now, is that area is very congested. It goes through the playground, it goes near the ball fields or just beside the ball fields and very near the school. What Piedmont would like to do is survey the area to ensure and document what space is there to put a pipeline. Right now, our understanding is there probably is not enough space to put a pipeline. They have to be a certain distance apart for safety reasons to get equipment between the lines without interfering with the line operation. So our understanding is there's not enough room. We will survey to find out, and it looks like since there will not be enough room, our alternate is to go around both the elementary and the high school.
And another question unrelated to the school issue, I noticed that when you do change the course and it goes up and around the high school, it looks like it's going through what were intended to be, but maybe are not yet, developments. You see what I'm referring to? in the-
Yes, ma'am. The light
Oh,
areas, like
light.
the
Is
trees
that-
have been cleared.
Is that not an extremely expensive way?
It could be,
To do
again, until we
this?
get out and survey. This is just an aerial map. We're not quite sure what is on the ground. Is it a cultivated field? Is it a proposed set of homes? Piedmont takes all this to account when we survey and look at what would be in the path. This map is at a 2,500-foot level. It's drawn in by hand by a surveyor for the route. What we actually do is look at the property, look at property lines. Our intent is to always follow property lines, not impact anyone's property through the middle, if possible.
Well, my concern there, I guess, is for the property owner who has made plans for that property, obviously. And I just wonder if they get the full value of that when it's taken for a gas line, if they've already gone to a lot of trouble, even if it's just surveying, or if they've even put the infrastructure in there, are they paid fully for that?
Yes, ma'am. What Piedmont Natural Gas does is when we talk to the landowner about purchasing rights to put the pipeline, in the extreme case, before we even look at condemnation, we look at paying full value for that section of the land. So even though the property owner will still own the property, still have access to the property for the section Piedmont does, it is our preference to pay fair value for that section of property, just for the right to put the pipeline before going to condemnation.
Thank you.
Can you talk about, the map is so small because you're trying to get it all on the paper, but I know that there is a stream right near Poplar Tent and Cox Mill Road, and it looks like y'all are, it doesn't look like you're going to affect it. I'm not certain. Can you talk about if the pipe is going across, going through? How do you navigate streams, both for a safety issue as well as future concerns? And then while you're doing the construction, what do you do with, how do you deal with a stream or any water, body of water?
When we get to a stream or body of water, we follow all the state requirements of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Natural Resources, DENR. And what they require Piedmont Natural Gas to do as a utility is go through a full permitting process with all the state agencies, look for threatened endangered species, look at the impact to the environment, make sure restoration is proposed and approved by DENR prior to starting construction. So what is left after construction is as good at or better than it was when the company went through. During construction, measures are put up to protect the water quality, to stop runoff from polluting the stream. Depending on the nature of the stream and how it's listed with DENR, Piedmont Natural Gas will either drill under the stream to avoid any impact to the area, or when we lay the pipeline through, we actually dam the stream and pump the water around the proposed construction, so water flow is not stopped and water quality is not impacted.
Okay. Couple more questions in regards to when work starts, whether doesn't matter what the line is. We've had some issues with when a work has been done, the homeowners aren't notified. We're coming, we should get to your area in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. Do you also put notices out there and tell people, hey, we're going to be in the neighborhood sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, be on the lookout for us? As the construction's going, how do you notify people ahead of the time where you're going?
As landowners are identified and rights are negotiated, Piedmont keeps them up to date on usually a monthly basis, and then as construction gets closer, a weekly basis of how it will impact their home, how it impacts the area, when there might be loud noises in the area. For extreme cases, Piedmont Natural Gas does make arrangements for hotels for landowners that are very near a loud construction noise at night, so that the family's not impacted as much.
Okay. And finally, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can jump up and down and say we don't want this to come through, but through legislation, y'all have the authority to put the pipeline in anyway, through eminent domain or what have you, because of being a public utility. Is that?
We do have that right, but typically we don't ever have to enforce it. That's part of the process. That's why you see a yellow line and a 600-foot red swath. And though this isn't permanent, this is our best thinking today. And as we go out and survey the areas, we'll learn additional information, just as we've done today. And Piedmont's preference is to work with a partnership with the landowners. And generally speaking, there's always a solution before.
And I'm not saying that y'all do that. It's just that at the end of the day, from the Board of Commissioners' perspective, we can try and work with you and try and not work with you, but we appreciate, you didn't have to come to us and talk to us about this. You didn't have to provide us with this information, but it is important for all of us to try and have as little as issue as possible.
That's our position as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you all very much. And if you don't mind here going forward, if you just help us out with just keeping us updated, you may not have to come to us, but at least tell us, we thought about this site, and so that we can do our best to have the public aware as well of what's going on. 'Cause-
Yeah, we'd be happy to. We'll work through Mike.
Thank you very
Downs.
much. Thank you, sir. This does not require us to have any board vote, since it does not need to be going on to the September the 20th unless one of the commissioners feels like it's important, but it's just for informational purposes. Okay. Next we have is G2, which is the 2010 CDBG Scattered Site Program request for public hearing and adoption of the public ordinance and budget amendment if it passes. Call on Mrs. Sifford.
Good afternoon. It is time for the CDBG scatter site cycle to begin again. We did receive notice last week. We've been working furiously on the application. It is due November 15th, which is the rush for the public hearings. We have to have one this month and one in October. Additionally, there are some new requirements on the application process that they had not had before. They are requiring a certified North Carolina home inspector to inspect the homes and that to be submitted, a report to be submitted with each applicant on this process, which will require me to have some funding up front if you so desire to move forward in order to pay for home inspectors. I did pursue the line of whether or not we could have building inspectors do that. They will not allow it. They want a certified North Carolina home inspector. They also want title searches, which we do in the process normally, but that usually comes after the application itself. They've front-end loaded some of this, so it will be reimbursable expense up to $7,000. So I will be requesting $7,000 now in order to pay for those expenses, and we would be reimbursed when we receive the grant.
Okay. Any questions for Mrs. Sifford?
Does that $7,000 cover, is that for the entire project or for each?
That would be for all the home inspections. I expect somewhere around 5 or 6 units to be done. So we would, I've got a proposal out to find out how much that will cost. I'm thinking somewhere between $250 and $500 per unit, plus another $150 for the title search. There may be an extra sheet with that we don't typically do that I may need to run through Rich. So I'm thinking that it probably won't be quite $7,000, but I'm going ahead and taking the maximum that they'll allow under the grant if that's your desire.
Okay. In regards to home inspectors, we're able to select the home inspectors?
Correct. I put out an RFP on Friday for home inspectors, and it's also posted on our website. I contacted some that came with good recommendation that I contacted some of my counterparts in different places, and I posted on the website to make it available to any certified home inspector in Cabarrus County. Well, and they could be from outside Cabarrus County as well. But
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to place this under new business to hold a public hearing? We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is page 247, G3. And this is the consent agreement and school capacity information for Deer Run Phase 3 subdivision. Mrs. Morris.
Good afternoon. This is a request for a consent agreement for Deer Run Phase 3 subdivision. It is in the town of Midland, and it is 14 single-family residential units, and it was approved back in June of 2008. The developer is now coming forward asking for the agreement to be approved. They did fall short, so they will be subject to a voluntary mitigation payment, and at that time, it was $4,034 with the payment due prior to final plating. And unless you all have any questions, and Mr. Newton is here this afternoon on behalf of the applicant, if you have any questions for him.
Mr. Newton, do you have anything else to add that Mrs. Morris may not have covered?
Only that we had originally requested with this application that the payment be made at the point of the building permit rather than final plating. And as Susie came in, she indicated to me that the consent agreement, as it's been drafted, would require the payment to be made during the final plat, which just requires a series of extra steps. You don't final plat 14 lots, you may only final plat 2 or 3 lots. Seems unnecessary, but if that's as she explained, that's policy of the board right now. We would agree with that.
I have a question. Hickory Ridge Middle School opened this year, correct?
That's correct.
So did that not relieve the overcrowding at Griffin?
If you remember, this is a consent agreement, so we don't have those specific numbers like we do for a reservation of capacity as far as seating. It's based on the percentages. So you can see in the memo, when this is developed, the capacity for CC Griffin was still going to be 182 because that school had not opened yet. And it would have capacity for
Let's
1,000
back up. When you say
students.
it hadn't opened yet, it hadn't opened when the original agreement was passed, or yet as in just a couple of weeks ago?
When we started processing this application, we had to use the numbers that we had at that time, and that school had not opened at that time. You can see that it is, estimated that it would help out, but they would still fall short at the elementary school and at the high school level.
All right. Let's do a different scenario and say he never had even brought this forward until now. This was a brand-new subdivision project, and it was going to have 14 houses, and Hickory Ridge Middle was open. C.C. Griffin Middle calculations would not show overcrowding.
But they would still fall short at the elementary and high school levels, so they would still be subject to the voluntary mitigation payment.
So did the new A.T. Allen did not relieve Bethel? I'm just
Once
trying to
they-
get my head on these numbers. with
It's
all
supposed to.
The openings that we've had.
Yeah, and once we have the 20-day numbers, if anybody moves forward with a reservation of capacity, we'll be able to provide you with those specific numbers. But based on the capacity for this particular project, even with Bethel, with A.T. Allen coming online, and Hickory Ridge, they still fall short at the high school level.
And where is the school system in looking at numbers now, considering that that things have changed so drastically as far as growth is concerned? Are they doing a different pattern, or are they still using the same formulas or whatever it is they used when we were going full blast?
We still use what is set up in the actual ordinance, the calculations that our APF ordinance requires. So the school is using those particular numbers based on the capacity for the actual school, what the core capacity is, plus accounting for any developments that are out there that have reserved their capacity or that have a consent agreement. In addition to that, we add in the new students, so that's where we get to those more specific numbers. And with the legislation that was passed last year in 2009, we do still have to carry those projects until those expiration dates, and the schools are reflecting that as well.
Prior to our-
I know you're doing it the way you need to do it, but I have a real problem with charging people fees for something, paying for something, and when other subdivisions may never even come online. They're
The
just sitting there
frustration-
fallow. It's very frustrating.
I agree. The frustration I have with that, Commissioner Minot, is that the legislature has extended all of the, so that what would have come off, and we would be looking at different numbers, I think were reduced numbers. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, extended everything across the state as opposed to, doing what, if it expired, it expired. But if we can, anyway, it speaks for itself, but it is interesting because the schools that were proposed have opened up, and I'm certain these numbers and these percentages are not accurate as of today. This is just an estimate. But we have any other?
May I add one?
Yes, sir.
Point? It is through the state's Permit Extension Act that this subdivision is allowed to continue forward. Otherwise, it would have expired, and Mr. Udi and his son, who are the two people who comprise this company, would have been required to go through and start the whole process over. So from a developer's standpoint or the property owner who has been looking to develop this, it's a mixed bag in terms of being able to have the Extension Act allow him to continue, but then also be subjected to an impact fee that, or voluntary fee that is being imposed at a point where he really doesn't have the money because he doesn't yet have those sales for the lots. So it's a mixed approval, but it is the muddied one that we have to work through.
Do we have or is there anything else? Do we have a motion to place this under new business or consent agenda?
I move we place this under new business.
We have a motion to place this under new business. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next one is G4, which is the consent agreement and school capacity information for Savannah Commons subdivision.
This is a consent agreement for Savannah Commons. Landmark Development Ventures is the applicant. It's a request for 28 single-family residential lots. This is located off of Pitt School Road. If you have driven down Pitt School Road, you will see that this development is currently under construction. There are some houses in there. They did go through final plating with the city of Concord. So the applicant has agreed to make a lump sum payment to catch up on the lots that have already been permitted, as well as to bring them into compliance with the ordinance, and they would pay for all of the lots at one time. So it would be an agreement that would be written for the $1,008 per lot. However, they would pay us $28,224 upon execution of the agreement. And they did fall short, so they are subject to the voluntary mitigation payment.
Any questions for Mrs. Morris at this time? We have a motion to place this under new business.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Morris. Next we have is G5.
Speaking of the legislation that you just brought up, Session Law 2010-177 is an act to amend the permit extension of 2009. If you had a chance to look at this, you'll see that the legislature did allow another one-year extension on development approvals. However, this particular one is not mandated. It is optional. So Rich and I thought that you all needed to weigh in on whether or not you wanted to proceed with the additional one-year extension, or if you wanted to remain under the 2009 Act. And those dates would stay in place, the current 2009 legislated dates. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have, or Rich can answer those questions.
I know sometimes trying to determine the motives of the, of the legislature is pretty difficult, but do we know, is it kind of, what they're looking at is the fact that markets could come back, local markets could come back quicker in different communities?
I think what they're looking at is, extending it for that additional year, but they also allowed you the option, just like Commissioner Minette was talking about, we are having to carry those developments on the books because it was mandated in 2009. This particular one, it's optional, whether or not you want to extend it for that extra year. So right now, the tolling, anything from December 31st, anything from January of 2008 through December 31st of this year, the time is tolled. We go back and we calculate a date from December 31st on. So if they had 6 months left, they would now expire June of 2010. So what this would do is it would actually then say that they would not expire until June of 2011. So we would be carrying those projects, and in some cases, carrying them up to an additional 3 years. Because right now, based on when the timing happened, we do have some projects that got about a 3-year extension.
I think it was a trade-off in the General Assembly between trying to allow local government to deal with what may be dead projects, not have to carry them. Because, as came up with the Deer Run project, we interpreted that, that statute to require us to carry our consent agreements for that additional period of time. So, but we know we have some that we don't think are ever going to come back, but yet they're still in the calculations for the numbers concerning school capacity. But on the other hand, I think it became clear that the economy wasn't recovering as fast as they thought when they passed Senate Bill, what was it, 2009-146. So I think it was a trade-off of those two things, and by the way they dealt with it was to allow the county to opt out of that extension or to extend it. And so then it becomes a decision for this board to decide which they want to do.
Do we have any idea how many projects are out there, and if we can classify them as, whether we classify them or get information to make a determination about whether they are live projects, dead projects, pie in the sky projects, what have you?
Speaking in terms of county projects, we have approximately 30 projects that were approved by the county planning and zoning board that are out there. The second part of this would be, the APF agreements. If the other jurisdictions choose to make the 1-year extension, they will provide us with the new expiration dates for their projects, and then the consent agreements would run that extra time because that's what that particular jurisdiction is recognizing as the expiration date. So it's actually twofold. One would be just the general approvals that we have in the county, and then the second part of that would be the consent agreements or the reservations of capacity that have been issued.
Well, I would say the issue is that we need to find out, for me to make a decision, I'd like to find out what's the city projects, what are the county projects, and I don't need the names, but how many of the projects there are out there, because if a developer is able to move forward and wants to move forward, we just got to figure out what sort of timeline is, what's the realistic time frame that he or she is working under, so that we can have correct numbers, or not correct numbers, we can have accurate numbers that we're basing potential school capacity on. That's what I see as the issue, so that before I feel comfortable in making a decision on this, I would like to have that information as to, what are some of the thoughts about the city on these projects? Are they going to extend it?
And I can answer that question
Okay.
for you. Harrisburg and Kannapolis have both opted to add the 1-year extension, and Concord, I believe, is in the process of starting to update their information. Locust had only one project, which would fall into this legislation, and I've requested information from Midland, but I have not heard back from them yet whether they were going to do the 1-year extension or not. But I do know for certain that Kannapolis and Harrisburg are. Concord was leaning that way, and so Midland is really the only one that I'm not sure about.
Okay.
Will we know before our meeting about Concord's direction they're taking? Do you anticipate knowing?
I can try to find out, but I can't guarantee that I would have that information. But
Well,
I
you'd have
feel
it by
fairly
October.
certain.
I mean, we can set it for October work
Yes.
session.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to make a decision in the next 2 weeks, do we, Mr. Cook?
Just before year end?
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's important to not only know, what's out there, but also whether a project's really going to move forward or not.
I move that we place this on our agenda.
Wait one second. Commissioner Minor, did you have something you want to add?
I just want to make the comment, am I not correct, that since the development rights go with the property, if someone sells a defunct subdivision that hasn't developed, the new buyer can then develop it that way? Is that correct?
That's correct, so long as it's viable,
So-
because our consent agreements run with the land. And they're recorded
Right.
documents, and so they
So
should.
it's going to be we're never going to get totally accurate picture. We're just going to get a picture.
I think that's a fair point, because it could be, until it expires, of course, the property. But typically, under the consent agreements anyway, we have there's a provision that allows the consent agreement to be assigned subject to county approval. Now, we have never denied approval on any of those, but it does allow the county to decide that independently based on the financial viability of the assignee, namely the new developer, to be able to carry forward with the project. Like I say, historically, we've always approved every one of those.
And I'm not saying that somebody shouldn't come in and develop it. I'd just like to get more concrete numbers so that, whether it's Mr. Newton's client or whether it's somebody else's client, is that we know the reality instead of what may or may not be occurring. And that's all the information. That's what I would be looking for, is if we can get some of that information.
Are you all interested in seeing what the, what the build-out, or not the build-out, but what the project list has that we have looks like with the development order with those legislated dates on them, so that you all can see how far we have to carry those projects on the book right now? And that would be for Kannapolis, Harrisburg, Concord. We do have that information based on the current legislation, and we could get that to you just in a day or two.
If you'd have the current maybe an Excel spreadsheet with the current date that is set to expire, and then if we were to enact it, what the new one, what the new date would be.
Yes, and we have that information, so that would show you what the other jurisdictions are going to have to carry on their books as well.
Okay. Anything else? Now we have a motion to place this under the October work session.
October work session, table it.
Okay, we have a motion to place this on our October work session in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next that we have is the Concord Library Piggyback Bid Award. This is on page 264.
Hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon. The Concord Library is undergoing some renovations work, and pursuant to that, we want to consider purchasing additional shelving. And based on General Statute 143-129, we have the ability of piggybacking on a previously awarded formal bid for Durham County. Durham County has purchased a larger quantity of shelving units, but they have extended the same discount to us that they have given to Durham County, so we'd like to purchase those shelving units from Researching and Development Solutions, or RDS, to finish our renovations project.
Can you explain where the money's coming from to purchase these items or do the renovations?
I'll have to defer that.
Isn't it coming from the Miriam Hayes Trust?
It's coming from the Library Trust Fund. A good portion of that contribution came from the Miriam Hayes upon her death, and then about $219,000 of it was transferred from the city of Concord to Cabarrus County when we took over the library.
Okay. There's not coming out of our operating account for
No,
this year?
it's all donated money.
Right. Any other questions for? Do we have a motion to place this under consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is G7, Department of Social Service request for 4 maintenance caseworkers. Mr. Rose,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
We are requesting 4 income maintenance caseworker 2s to join the Economic Services Division. As you're aware, we have seen a high increase in demand for our services with the economic situations that we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, just in the first 6 months of 2010, we've seen an 8% increase in food stamp caseloads alone. And if you go back to 2008, when the economy really started to have its struggles, if you go back to January 2008, we've seen a 38% increase in the food stamp caseloads from that period to the present. We're approaching about 10,000 cases right now in food stamps, serving over 22,000 citizens. So we have a very high caseload in this area now. Medicaid has seen some of these increases as well too, not quite as drastic. But with the unemployment situation, we've had a lot of family and children cases that have come in. When parents are unemployed and they have children in the household, they can often qualify for Medicaid. The adult caseload has not quite seen the explosion, even though what's happening there is we're seeing a lot more people come through the door to apply. But when you're an adult, you have to either be aged or disabled, and often they don't meet the criteria. So we don't see the increase in the caseload necessarily, but we're seeing the traffic and the people coming in for applications. We are expecting these trends to continue. This past July, the state implemented categorical eligibility for food stamps. This was an option that the state elected to take based on the economic conditions throughout the state. And basically what it did was it increased the eligibility guidelines to 200% of poverty for the food stamp program. And it took away all resource limits for the food stamp program. So basically a family of 4 right now with a household income of about $44,000 can actually qualify for food stamps. Since July, we've seen about an average increase of 175 more applications in food stamps per month. So that is starting to impact us, and we're expecting to see more impact from that. The state has projected we'll see anywhere from a 30 to 60% increase statewide in food stamp caseloads over the next year with that. Our food stamp caseworkers right now are carrying caseloads of over 500. Family and Children's Medicaid, they're over 700, so they are definitely at a maximum capacity for their caseloads. And of course, when you get the higher the caseloads get, the more prone you are to error and to issuance errors, and that can cause a lot of issues for counties. As we know, one of the most famous lawsuits we had was based on that very thing right there. So,
Can you talk about the error? What happens when there is an error now?
yes. What happens when there's an error now, depending on the program, food stamps, usually the error actually falls back to the client. It's the client's responsibility for the error. However, we can get cited in administrative reviews for errors and sanctions. Medicaid can fall back to us. We can actually have paybacks in Medicaid, which can get pretty extensive. If you have a major hospital stay and we've made a mistake, we have to pay back Medicaid for that.
The county?
Yes. So we have a little part in our budget set aside for that, and we're very fortunate. We have excellent staff. Our error rates have been low, and we haven't had to deal with that, but the potential is always there. Another issue that we talked about at the board meeting as well, too, that Jay has mentioned is that when we have a person come in to apply for any federal public assistance program, we have to see them that day. We're required to take that application. We cannot reschedule them based on the volume that we have. So if we have people coming in the door that want to apply, we need to see them that day and start that process. We think these trends are going to continue. Again, we don't see any drawback on our caseload sizes. Categorical eligibility, I think, is really going to impact us over the next year or two with food stamps. And Medicaid is a potential for growth is there pretty strong as well, too, even in the adult Medicaid population. In Medicaid, we're serving over 23,000 citizens in this county. So there's over 23,000 citizens that are getting Medicaid services. And then you add another probably 2,500 children that are receiving Health Choice. So we're impacting about 26,000 citizens with Medicaid in this county alone. So that's a pretty big caseload, pretty big size. So this request is, based on, again, the demands that we've seen with the economic situation, the increase in eligibility, and we feel like those increases, those eligibility expansions will probably continue as well, too. Even healthcare reform has a little bit of eligibility expansion in it in the year 2014. So this is a trend that we just don't see going away.
I understand, Ben, that the and we can work through Piedmont, that the PBH, that the Medicaid increase, you could see up to 50% eligibility increase in Medicaid in 2014. And that's going to be a tremendous
Yes,
increase in the caseload, too.
yes, one of the impacts, I believe, from the healthcare reform is the poverty level goes up to 133% for Medicaid in 2014, which would greatly expand our caseloads, because we have a lot of people that are just on the bubble that do not get Medicaid or have very, very high deductibles. So, I think that's not out of the realm of possibility.
The 4 that you're asking for, how does that, do you have an idea what the average caseload would be then with the 4 additional?
Based on how we would probably structure, we could probably get the food stamp caseloads down to about 450 to 475 per worker, but we would probably target 1 or 2 of these positions at Family and Children's Medicaid as well, too, with their caseloads being 700. And again, they're seeing a lot of foot traffic as well, too, to try to get their caseloads down a little bit. It would have, some impact, and it would definitely help. And it's hard to project with Medicaid what it would be, but we could probably get it down a little bit there, too. So we would probably spread these 4 positions over both those programs.
How many caseworkers do you have now?
We have about 45 in food stamps, I believe, and I think there's about 30 or so in Medicaid, serving that population.
And one thing that when I was asking at the board meeting was, how do you deal with the number of people that come in? Because if you have to see them every day, how do you just can't stop at 5 o'clock and say, doors are shut, we'll see you tomorrow. There is an exception to that, is that if you're there, you can ask for an appointment time, but it has to be from the person, not from the department. The department can't seek appointment times, oddly enough, but it has to be from the person that's seeking the services, so that they're on some of them are on a rotating schedule, that they'll come in later in the morning to work later at the night, and some of them obviously come in regular hours, so that, but they are required. It was amazing. Are required. And thankfully enough, with the sheriff out there hasn't been too many problems. There have been some issues, but hasn't been too many problems with people waiting in line, people getting upset about having to wait, so that the people that are asking for assistance understand what the workers are going through for a certain degree.
We are studying the possibility of expanding our hours, like for 1 night a week, to help with people that work, especially now that we have the expanded eligibility. We have a lot of working individuals or households that receive food stamps. So we're looking or studying the possibility of maybe expanding our hours to like 7 p.m. on a Wednesday every week to help those households as well, too. But our lobbies have definitely been at capacity over the last few months. It's been quite a sight to see.
Is there a motion to place this under consent or new business?
I move we put it on the consent agenda.
We have a motion to place this under consent agenda. We have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
The next we have is G8, is the Board of Elections discussion, selection process of architect and general contractor, I believe. Mr. Downs.
That's correct. At your meeting last month, the board decided to move to a new location at the old creamery located up on North Church Street for the Board of Elections. At that time, you did not select an architect or a contractor. Just to remind you, we are currently under contract with Yates Kreitzberg and with CM Black to design and construct the building that we had originally proposed to go out at the old fairgrounds, and then looked for other multiple locations for it. So we're still under contract with them. If we want to continue those contracts, we can do so without having to go back out. If the board chooses to not continue those contracts and go a different route, whether it's a new architect or a new contractor, we would need to send out RFQs for both of those areas. Remember that YCH was the architect, CM Black was the construction manager at risk for the project. So we're asking as far as staff, so that we can get moving on the design. We're asking for some direction from the board as to how you would like us to proceed.
Any questions for Mr. Downs? I just see, it's very important that we move quickly because the elections are coming up next. Well, I think there's going to be elections in May, and I know that they need to get in as quickly as they can prior to that May so they can get acclimated to what's going on. And also the public needs to be understanding where the new location is, because I have no idea how long it's been in the current location, but it's been at least 15 years. So that the public's going to need to be aware of where to go vote and what needs to be done, and that's going to be an education process as well. So that I think that we've got to almost back into the date is give them an opportunity to do a punch list, figure out what's going on. So I think we need to do it. We need to move forward sooner rather than later. We did contract with YCH, I believe, and also CM Black as construction manager at risk for the contemplated construction. And now, since it's changed a bit, we have this before us. Is there any preference one way or the other, or what would the board like to do?
Does this change anything since it's not such a large project? And do we need, I mean, is there anything about the construction manager at risk that is not necessary for this project, or that is good to continue for this project? I don't know that answer.
Mr. Downs or Mr. Day, whoever.
The size of the project really doesn't make a difference. And again, part of the value of that was being able to choose the firm that would be doing the construction. And without doing construction manager at risk, then you take bids and choose the lowest bidder. Sometimes we've had that work out really poorly for us in the past on some projects. So I'd suggest that you continue the relationship with the same firms that are there. YCH has already done the schematic and already done the programming for Board of Elections, so they're way ahead of the process as compared to a new firm coming in.
You just need a motion to put this selection on the...
It can be as broad as for discussion on new business, or I think the motion can be as specific as to put on the consent agenda the retaining of YCH Architects and CM Black Construction for the remodeling of the old creamery for the Board of Elections. So it's...
Well, I will say that that's my motion.
Under the consent agenda?
To put that on the consent agenda.
Okay.
The way you phrased it.
Do we have a second to place this under consent agenda for the retaining of YCH Architects and CM Black Construction for the remodeling or renovation for the Board of Elections? We have a motion. We have a second. I'll make a second to put us under consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed. Motion carries. The next is G9, is the resolution.
We are currently working with both school boards on qualified school construction bonds, and we're down to the phase of having a public hearing for discussion of this issue, and once the public hearing is held, to adopt a resolution to do the financing contract with it. The amount of the Q-Scabs is $14,637,160. The way we're approaching this financing is that the principal will be deferred for a 5-year period, and there will be 0 interest that we have to pay back on this debt. We are currently shooting for a 17-year term, but right now the market is showing about a 14-year term, and so if that were to take place, when we start making those payments back, we would be paying $1,626,351 per year for the 9 years after the 5-year deferral. So I guess the request is to go ahead and schedule the public hearing and consider the motion for the resolution for the financing contract, if you so choose to continue this project.
Is there any questions for Mrs. Dubois?
place it on, make a motion to place it on the agenda and have a public hearing.
We have a motion to place this under new business to hold a public hearing and consider a motion to adopt the resolution. We have a second. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The next is G10, is update on the 2001 COPS refund.
Okay, I'll start out with that. On September the 1st, we refunded all the callable 2001 COPS that were outstanding. Those are certificates of participation. We refunded $18,920,000 with an all-in new interest rate of 2.39. Savings over the 11 fiscal years that remained on the debt is $2,366,350. We saved $4,350 in the current fiscal year, and from 2012 to 2021, the savings will be between $234,000 to $239,000. The percentage of savings is something to be spoken of as remarkable. It was 10.47%, and the rates have not been this low since May of 1967. So that will add a little bit of money back over the next 11 years as far as that savings was concerned. And since we had so much fun, we're going to approach you with refunding the 2002-2003 COPS issues. They're somewhere around 35 million, but we've asked up to an aggregate principal amount of 45 million, depending on whether there's a premium or a bond on that issue. We will go to the Local Government Commission on October the 5th for approval to do that, and would have a tentative sale date of October the 7th. One of the things that I would be asking for this evening would be a general consensus of the commissioners to allow us to go ahead and mail the official statement on September 24th or September 27th, which would be prior to the Local Government Commission date to meet to discuss the issue. The potential cost, if the Local Government Commission would not approve this refunding, would be $2,000 for the county. But because we want to continue with the momentum of the rates as what they are, the only date we could get in October was October the 7th to actually do this refunding. So would like to have that consensus of the board to go ahead and allow us to mail those statements earlier, and then to place on the agenda the motion for the financing contract.
Any questions for Mrs. Dubois? We're not borrowing any additional monies.
No additional money, and not extending the 14-year term left on the debt,
We're just getting a lower interest rate.
just like refinancing a house.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to, since it's going to be a resolution, we need to have it on for new business. Do we have a motion? Well, we can do consent if we'd like to, correct?
I believe you can.
Okay. Is there any
moved.
problem? Is there a
Make a
motion
motion.
placed in consent? Anybody? We have a motion to place the adoption of the resolution to allow us to refinance if it's favorable to the county to, on the consent agenda for September the 20th. We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
And do we have a consensus on allowing us to mail the official statement early?
Commissioner Privet? Do you have any issue with mailing the
Official
preliminary
statement.
official statement early?
Run that by again.
Do you have an issue with mailing the official statement to the League of Municipalities early because it's going to coincide with our meeting in October, and we need to get it done? And since we don't vote on anything, well, we don't vote for the most part in this meeting, we just need to have a consensus if it's okay with everybody to move forward with the project.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Cruz? Good,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next matter we have is G11, is the request for letter of support for STEM, North Carolina STEM Initiative. I call on Mr. Cox.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I trust that you are aware of North Carolina being a STEM community, STEM state, STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and math. I think there are a couple of letters in your packet, and it's simply a request asking you to endorse the concept of an application by the community in this case being defined as Cabarrus and Rowan counties, to apply to become a STEM community. If we are selected, then we become eligible to receive funding from foundations and others for a site-specific project. There's no project that has been identified. This is the very early stage. There was a signing ceremony that Chairman White was able to attend last week at RCCC. The college wanted to get this out there and get it, make it public. I think you've had the opportunity to read in the local papers about the STEM initiative, and this is simply asking for your endorsement of the process. It doesn't commit you to providing any funds, any in-kind support, any staff, or any other resources at this point. My guess is, as a project develops and as it moves forward, someone will come back to you and ask you to be involved in some way. Carol Spalding, excuse me, from the president of Rowan Cabarrus Community College, is she's not chairing it, but I think in this initial stage, she is one of the two leaders that are really working on this. I think the idea first came to us from Senator Hartzell. Margie Bembo has been working as the lead facilitator on it. So that, in simplest terms, is what we're asking for. The Cabarrus Regional Chamber and the Economic Development Boards both have voted to endorse the project by letter, and that's what we're asking you to do as well.
Any questions for Mr. Cox? The thing, when I got your email last week concerning the STEM initiative, it just said that the community must contribute at least $20,000 in cash or in-kind services, and that's was a concern of mine, is that, you know, wanted the board to understand that that may be asked of us in the future. And then I think since then I spoke to Mr. Legg, and he was saying that it was his understanding that any cash or that it could be cash or in-kind services, and it's a cumulative request, not independent request of each local body.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else? Do we have a motion to place this under the consent agenda to, let's get this right, to support the county's initiative for the NC STEM project? We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next we have is G12 is the it's approval of revised economic development grant agreement for LKN, ACN, and public hearing. Mr. Cook and Mr. Cox, and I guess Mr. McDaniels, will you be joining us on this?
This is something that the board has talked about actually a couple of times, and have been made aware of the issues that have come up with reference to the assessed value or the assessed valuation on the ACN property. Of course, this is the old CTC Windstream headquarters building on Progress Place. Part of the transaction that brought ACN to Cabarrus County involved purchase of that building and certain upfitting, and then the acquisition of a good bit of personal property to equip it, and then the bringing of a certain number of jobs to Cabarrus County. This particular economic incentive grant, which was done by the board in 2008, was a 5-year grant at 99% of the increase in assessed value, and that was a grant that was to be matched dollar for dollar, both for the county incentive grant and also the City of Concord incentive grant, up to a maximum of $300,000. Due to the nature of the transaction, it became apparent that when you have a situation in which you buy an existing building and then upfit it, it created some issues about the actual assessed value that made it difficult for ACN to realize the full anticipated grant. Under those circumstances, because of the match, particularly with the One North Carolina Fund, we've been looking at ways to allow them to be able to realize the full value of that grant under the circumstances where there really is no increase in the real property assessed value because it was an existing building. But there was a good bit of, even though there was some upfit, the total assessed value of the upfit and the personal property did not equal the $5 million that was originally anticipated as being the increase in total assessed value. So as the board has done from time to time on other grants, we've looked at some waivers of some of the existing policies or provisions of the program in the economic grant program. And what we've discussed is allowing ACN to be able to be granted on additional personal property that they acquire during the 5-year grant period. So there's a draft agreement in the agenda that speaks to that issue that essentially reworks the grant to allow ACN to be granted on additional personal property that would be purchased during the grant period, up to the maximum of the originally anticipated grant. And of course, since that's different from what the program provides, there would need to be a waiver of the program provisions to allow that to occur. So that's what is contained in this revised economic development grant agreement for ACN. And of course, this matter being a matter that's an economic development matter under GS 158-7.1 would require a public hearing. So we would ask that it be placed on the agenda for new business and a public hearing be held to consider approval of the revised grant agreement.
Any questions? We have a motion to place this under new business. We have a second.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Under G13, the discussion of a new contract with an economic development corporation. This was placed on for today because the current contract expires at the end of October, and shortly, it was last time we were met, there was last time there was a work session, Mr. Lampy indicated to us that there's going to be a retreat, which is going to be on Thursday of this week, and that afterwards we would need to sit down and discuss any terms or negotiate any terms and conditions for the balance of a contract from October of this year, or it could be end of September, depends on how the negotiations go, from September or October this year through June of next year or further, depending on what this board discusses. Commissioner Poole, myself, and Mr. Day will be meeting. I sent out an email to Mrs. Seyfried, Mr. Lampy, and Mr. Cox yesterday about a potential meeting date of September the 21st. I'd heard back from Mrs. Seyfried as well as Mr. Cox, have not heard back from Mr. Lampy about September the 21st being a date that we can meet to go over doing an extension of the contract. But prior to September 21st or whatever day is contemplated, I felt it appropriate that both Commissioner Poole and myself and Mr. Day understand what sort of are the driving points for this board so that we can move forward. in regards to extending a contract for the EDC or with the EDC. The reason why that's important is under our ordinances, the county cannot fund any agency without having a contract, and that's the reason why we did the short-term contract until October, which would have been a quarter, and then we figure out what we're going to do for the balance of the other 3 quarters. With that that's where it's on today. So I'll open it up for commissioners' discussions about what are some of the issues that you see that we need to think about and move forward with.
Well, I'll jump in first. It would appear that there are need for some specific communication parameters between EDC and the Board of Commissioners. Concerning several types of issues. For instance, let me pull one out that I think was of concern to me, I think perhaps to some of the other commissioners, and that was the time at which we receive information about a project. I think that it's very important that the Board of Commissioners be in the loop, so to speak, on projects as soon as any other entity in the county is. And I think when it came to the cell guard issue, we felt maybe we were a little late in the loop there, maybe not, but I think that was sort of a feeling we had. So that's a very easily solved issue, just to make in a formal agreement if necessary, or just an informal agreement that any of the entities that are going to be asked to make a decision on a project know about the project at about the same time. I think that's a very important change or direction we might want to move in. And that, of course, gets to the issue of communication in general. And, there have been issues that maybe haven't been communicated as well as they could have been, going both directions. So maybe as you discuss, you and Ms. Poole discuss with them those issues, you can get into the details and whether that needs to even be in a contract or whether it just needs to be an agreement moving forward.
Okay. Anything else? Commissioner Cruth?
3 things that just to hit on that I've come up just in thinking through some of the stuff that we've been discussing the last few weeks, and some things to chew on. And some of these one of these is definitely just a idea to throw out, and I'm not, necessarily, that's sometimes throw ideas out to see what happens. I guess what it's throw spaghetti against the wall so it sticks or not. But one of them is we've been talking a lot about. I think we use the word accountability. I think a better word would be metrics, and every organization has metrics. And I think that one thing to look at is the activity-based metrics, because I think we've been talking about results metrics, but we can't get results metrics. Results come from the activities, and I think that if we had a simple formatted report, because you can spend so much time preparing the report and doing the research to get the data together, that it takes away from what should be done, that's recruiting and new industry and helping identify businesses that are ready to expand. So something that's simple, 5 or 6 measurements of what we have from a marketing standpoint, marketing contacts, or responses to inquiries that have been, that we, or contacts we've made or whatever, so that we have just a quick way as a barometer that we see how things are going, what's coming up then, maybe the next period of time. Also on our cycle, on our budgeting, I know that July, we definitely have said, hey, that's a very bad time to have it. But I know that with our own planning cycle, where we go through our retreat, we have our retreats usually in the early spring late winter, early spring, is that if you look at every 2 years, the board changes, regardless, maybe one person, new person, maybe 2 new people, maybe 3 new people. But in that period of time is in the fall of the, for lack of a better term, fall of the election year. So this fall, it would be when a time that the EDC board and the commissioners would discuss a little bit about what's working, what's not working, what has worked, or where we've had successes, where have we had things that we got to the 11th, to the 5-yard line, and we're not able to get the touchdown. How do we look at it? Do we have to tweak our strategies for the next year? And then that comes to us, another meeting at our retreat. There's a part of our retreat is set aside for discussion of what we want to do, and that then leads to a new contract that's done in the spring before the budget even starts. So we know up front what we're doing, what we want to be doing from an economic development standpoint. Then you could do that in such a way so that you could then have periodic reviews from that of how are we doing, where are we going, so that every time we get a new board, we always update our goals and objectives. That's usually one of the first things we do at a retreat. So that gives us an opportunity then, based upon what maybe the results of the election were, of what we look at as far as the new board and what the feeling is of where we want to go, if we want to go a radically different direction or we want to tweak what we're doing. I mean, and that's the second thing. The third thing is that just like this comes back to the funding thing about how that the funding, I know that kind of using the model we used back in the mid-90s when the county took over economic development from the cities and said we would handle all of it, and I think that's where the funding level started at, is have some way we can index that so that, I know that when we were having discussions back in 2004 timeframe about how to reorganize, there was some concern in getting the public-private partnership going, and private investors were concerned about that we would use the private money to supplant county funding, and we would start reducing the county funding because we had the private investment coming in. What I would say do is go something where I don't think we could go something like we do with the Health Alliance where it's a per capita, but if we had some way set up where I was thinking, this is the idea I throw out, is the idea that if you took and I think, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned to me yesterday when we were discussing, kind of talking about this, that there was about $230,000, I believe, that is the municipal contributions and the private investment in the organization. That if what we could do is match dollar for dollar what that figure is, as far as our funding is concerned. That way, what you would do is be an enticement then to the cities as well as the private investors that know that we're not supplanting our funding with theirs, that we're actually, when you give $1 and you invest $1 in economic development in the city or as a private investor, you're going to see 100% match on that funds from the county. I mean, up to a certain amount. I mean, if we get $1 million, we don't think we go to $1 million, but it would be a way to double that, automatically show a partnership. I think that some of y'all expressed about that. But anyway, that's just my idea to throw into this discussion. So.
Okay. Commissioner Poole.
I'm good right now. I'm running late, and I apparently left my other notebook at home, so.
Notebook with all the notes.
Yeah.
For your presentation.
Typically. So
Commissioner
that.
Privet.
That's interesting. A couple comments.
Commissioner Privet, do you have any things to add to it?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, I think
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Can I just add one thing?
Commissioner
that came
Minor,
to my
yes.
mind after leading off? I didn't have my thoughts together too well. We've been talking about small business initiatives too, things we can do for the small business, and I know that Mr. Day has been working on that sort of thing too. I would hope that somehow these could be linked in a way, not necessarily become part of the EDC's program, but at least have some sort of communication link with the EDC. Perhaps if there's a community committee or whatever evolves from that, looking at the things for these small businesses that someone from that committee become a member of the board of EDC, or somehow have a contact with them. They're spending their time, beating the bushes for projects such as the ones they've been bringing to us, but this initiative is more things that the commissioners alone can do for businesses. At least that's what I'm seeing it evolving into. But somehow, let's connect those two so that we don't have diverging groups, because sometimes they will mesh. And so it'd be important that they communicate in some way.
Okay. Anything else? The way I look at it is we've got to figure out how to get more jobs in here. There's no doubt about that. And there's a lot of different theories about how the jobs can come in here. We've got a lot of, and I'll call it infrastructure. We have a lot of infrastructure, and what I mean by infrastructure, we have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses already here. And when I say medium-sized businesses, I'll use the same definition that's been told to me time and time again, is medium-sized business is 500 people or less. So that very few are there large businesses in Cabarrus County. And when you're looking at small to medium-sized businesses, those that are here, we've got to figure out a way, and we've been asking for it, and I'll continue to champion it. We got to figure out a way to help them and what can be done. So I think that is one thing that's very important, and if the EDC believes that they no longer can service that area, then I would argue to this board that we need to champion that, because without small and medium-sized businesses, what are we? It's important to have the larger businesses. It's important to have the larger retailers, but it's also important to have small retailers. I think that when we talk about the negotiations, I think it really concerns me that each one of the points of accountability were asked to be removed from the contract, and I think it's important that we look at getting back to what you say, or putting it back in the contract. And what you said, Commissioner Caruth, is correct, is whether it's accountability or whether it's metrics, there needs to be accountability and metrics, especially when we are giving money to an organization outside the county. We request that and we demand it of the Health Alliance. We request it and we demand it of the schools, and every agency that I know of that we give to it. We understand what they're doing, and they are, there's accountability there. We know what the money's being spent on. We know where it's going. So I think that's very important, that we need to place accountability, whether it's accountability and metrics, back in, and something that is not so verbose, but something that we can all look at and understand. I think if we are going to continue to be, right now we're funding it, I believe, at 50% of the revenues for the EDC comes from the county, or roughly 50%. If we're funding at that level, then we need to know what's going on, whether it's on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, or a semi-annual basis. I leave that up to what is the most effective way to get that information and to garner that information for us to understand where we're going, why are we going there, and how are we going to keep our eye on the prize of getting more jobs here. So I think that's important, that we need to look back and get that in there. In regards to, I think in conjunction with that, we also need to understand, the five of us need to understand, or whoever is sitting up here needs to understand, what is the environment that Cabarrus County is in right now. Whether it is whatever the time of year, or the quarter of the year, whatever you want, whenever we're having a discussion or whenever we're getting information, we need to have an idea about what's the environment. What can we do to be better? What can we do to achieve what the goal is to get more of the residents here back to work. We've got an unemployment of about 8,000 people, and we need to get that low. Again, it gets back to, if we're going to fund, where's it going, and how we know that that's going to come towards getting a return on that. And whether the proper terminology is return on investment, or I don't know what the proper terminology is, but we need to understand how it's working and what's being done. We were presented with a report last month by the CDBG, and Michael Bafinski said, you know, on the website we have metrics. We know exactly how many people hit it. We know what they're doing. We know what's going on, and we get reports on that on a monthly basis. I'm not asking for those reports on a monthly basis, but we should understand, hey, this is working, this isn't working. In every one of our line of businesses, whether you're self-employed or dealing with a company trying to get new clients, you understand sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not. I had a partner that was talking about a luck line. Sometimes you throw out a luck line to see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, you learn from it and you move forward. So that I think that's important. I think it's accountability. And another thing that really concerns me is that the contract that was asked of us to enter into did not, or took out the provision that jobs brought to the county would be paying at or above the average wage for that market. I think that needs to be back in there, is that and not for just to have a goal that we need to look for jobs that pay at or above the market share for that, or an average for that industry. And if it's not, doesn't mean we look at it. I mean, doesn't mean we don't change things, because there's always exceptions to the rules. But we certainly need to understand what's going on. But I think as it relates to communication, what Commissioner Minot said, communication needs to be accurate, needs to be current. Too many times have we been provided with information that we were told was accurate, to come to find out later it's not accurate. It wasn't current. The company wasn't contacted, and that can't happen. You know, and to allow it to continue to happen, it concerns me. So I think what we touched on here today are some very important things. I would ask that if there's anything else that the commissioners would like to, for us to get our hands around or understand, to put in the contract or look in the contract. If you'll let Commissioner Poole, Mr. Day, or myself know, we'll certainly take that. And what I would propose is that before, if something changes, or not changes, but anything is added, that each of us will be notified prior to whatever day we meet, September the 21st, whatever day that may be. This is what we're going to do. This is the parameters that y'all are asking us to look into, so that if there's something, if you leave here and you remember something different, or you think about something differently, let us know, and we'll certainly put it down. And as soon as I know or confirm a date, I will certainly let each of y'all know what day that is, so that y'all will have that information as well. Commissioner Cruz.
One other thing to add from a while ago, I think it'd be good too if we had in a, talking about the metrics, but also we, of course, when we have success, and everybody knows about that. But when we have, sometimes we do get to that 5-yard line, and a lot of times to get across the goal line we can't do it, but it's stuff out of our control. I mean, like the owner of the company might decide he's going to go to southern Mississippi to relocate because he likes the Saints better than he likes the Panthers, or something like that. Maybe an extreme example, but how, it would be great to hear even though some of those stories about, because it also helps us to see if there's any kind of trends that we can address. It would be a way to address those, and the public to know that, yeah, okay, we got to the last cut on that one project, but it's something totally out of control that caused that project to go somewhere else. Because a lot of times we don't hear about those. We don't even hear about the, the public may not even know that there's been a lot of work done to put those together, and put together proposals for those, and then we end up losing out, and this is why we lost out, so that people see that, it wasn't just that there's something we can build on going forward. A site's been developed, or other relationships develop because of that will play out in the long run for us, so.
I would imagine that sometimes you can get that information and sometimes you can't, but
Mhm.
it's something
Yeah,
that we
just an
can.
example, maybe just examples show us
Yeah.
for the public.
Commissioner Minot.
All of what we've been discussing is very valuable, and I'd also like to hear from them with some of their thoughts about how we can, how we can get ourselves on a good level playing field here. I do know that there's been tremendous concern among their board and some folks in the public about the cut in their budget. And I wonder how we're going to address that. I know there was some request that wasn't a formal request, but there was a preliminary request that I saw asking for some restoration of funds, but I don't know where that stands. I don't know whether that should come to us as a formal request, but I don't think that we should, forget that they have had their budget cut tremendously, and we're sitting here talking about all the things we expect that they do, and I wonder if they can really do all the things we expect with less staff. So I'd like to hear some comments on that from Mr. Cox.
Mr. Cox?
Well, I would say thank you very much for the opportunity to do the work that I think that we do every day in this community, to sustain existing businesses and bring new jobs here. I hope this forum has provided you the full outlet that you need to continue to talk about the inadequacies of the EDC. I mean, we've beat this dog to death. I mean, I was the smartest kid in the dumbest row in school, and I can figure it out. I got it. So I hope that when we have public discussion again about the EDC, that it's positive. We like to think that we do our jobs well. And we like to think that just like any other person who works hard, that we derive some satisfaction from the work that we do. We get up every day to go to work to be good stewards of the dollars that not only you entrust to us, but every one of our funders. We care about this community. We care about the entire community. We love these communities and we love to sell them. The contract that Jay mentioned that does the new one, I guess, that does not need to be verbose, but something that we can all understand. I didn't write the first contract. It came to us from the county. It's the same contract we've had for 7 years. I don't think a word of it has changed. When it came time, when you find out that your largest funder is going to cut your funding, and there's reaction on the part of the board. Scott Lampe was here last month, and he told you he was the one who made the cuts to the contract. Can you realistically expect that we would be responsible to you for all those things at half the funding? But I suppose the other side of that argument is maybe we've not been responsible enough in the first place. And the person who has to take responsibility for that is me. And I have tried in as many ways as I know how to find a way to positively move through this. And it just, in my estimation, is exacerbated by yet one more meeting in public where all of our inadequacies are aired. You voted or you discussed in your August 2nd meeting And perhaps Commissioner Poole is the one who suggested that it be an interim contract through October. Maybe not. Someone did, and that was the decision. And so on August the 16th, I think you voted to have an interim contract. And I contacted your manager, and he told me that he was going to put the contract into the county's automated contract. John, I'm probably going to get that wrong.
It's a contract management system, and it's not automated.
Okay. And so maybe it's in the system and it just hasn't come to us yet. So insofar as I know, we're still operating without a signed contract, which for us isn't a problem. Our job is our job, and we're going to do it every day. So, you know, when I hear this discussion today, I'm wondering if we're even going to get the interim contract to sign. That's going to take us maybe to the end of September, maybe to October, when we're going to get together on the 21st of September now to discuss it. So I'm sorry that we don't have a signed contract. If we had one, if I had a copy of it, I'd sign it. I've read your book, not your book, The Small Mart Revolution. And I like books. I'm a reader. I'm a lifelong learner, try to be. And there's nothing wrong with a book. Books are full of ideas. In a meeting I had with Commissioner Poole last week, I told her that it did bring to me some sense of relief in hearing her speak last month, holding up the book saying, if you understand where the county commission's going on economic development, read this book. I read the book. And I thanked her for that because I had no idea. It brought me some, if nothing else, mental reprise. Because I have a new perspective on things that you're thinking about and directions that you want to go, that prior to that I did not have. It is a different way of looking at the world. And like with most ideas, I think it's an and, it's not a but. From my perspective, we want to do everything that's possible to ignite every sector of our economy so that it's the strongest economy in the metropolitan Charlotte area. And I seek your forbearing and your understanding and your forgiveness for not having delivered that to the level that you need. And as I've said, we'll work every day to remedy that so that at some point it will be satisfactory. The memo that was sent last week about what we would do if there was an additional $100,000, we've lost one job. We would replace that job. We would allocate more dollars in recruitment and marketing for closing funds as I identified. I trust that's made it to all of you. I don't know. In fact, Ryan and I were discussing today, working on a certified site. And the end of that process, we really only need $1,000 to do it. And that's not in our budget. We're going to have to go to our board and ask them, in order to get the certified site, shall we take $1,000 out of our marketing, our very limited marketing dollars, and certify this site, knowing that sites are what bring people here. Well, I don't want to just continue to make a long, unnecessary speech. But that's what we would use that additional $100,000 for. It's absolutely difficult to be down just over 50% from your primary funder. You know, when a board looks at the reasons why, they have to look at the person who leads the agency and say, you know, get this fixed, get it right, or get yourself somewhere else. So I've taken the cut in funding exceptionally seriously. Have done everything I know to see some of the funding restored. That's what we would do if there was another $100,000. I do want to express appreciation to all the people who work in our building. Whether they're on the CVB side, they do a great job. They're doing a great job. Their market is the world. There's 6.5 billion people on the planet who could come to Cabarrus County, stay in our hotels, hit their website looking for information about Cabarrus or Charlotte or motorsports or whatever. Our market is very small. In good times, there are about 1,500 projects a year, and out of those 1,500 projects, maybe about 110, 120 actually hit. So you have to understand that we are not travel and tourism. We are economic development. To Ms. Minot's point, I think, and forgive me, ma'am, if it was not your point, but the issue about making the information available in a timely fashion. I recall the night that we went into closed session, which was February the 15th, and Commissioner Poole, and we've had this discussion, I wouldn't say anything, try not to out of school here, but looked at me and said, this is an awful lot of stuff to digest at once. Well, we had sent that information in long before, and the fact that you didn't get it, I am held responsible for it, but that was not my doing. Like on most projects, we can give you a timeline. Selgard project, I think, started a year ago this month. That's all water under a bridge now. And instead of celebrating the investment of $57 million and 150,000 square foot manufacturing facility and over 200 local jobs that do pay above a wage standard, it has served to be a great the process, a great irritant. And again, the person who sits in my chair is the person who has to take that responsibility. So you either live and learn, or you just live and you don't learn, you make the same mistakes again. I want to find the way that is most effective to work with this elected body, and if it means copying all of you with all the documents every single time, then we can do that. We have typically worked with the chairman. There was an example a couple weeks ago where we had a prospect in town and he couldn't be there. So we invited the vice chair, Commissioner Poole, and she came to the dinner and sat right beside the prospect, across the table from Congressman Kissel and another mayor and manager, and Mike Downs was there, and whomever else. And I hope you gain from that experience that it's not a cloak and dagger operation that we're running. You had full access to the client. And I think you've talked with the client since. And I hope we can land. I will tell you, the chairman and the manager were in a meeting, a private meeting last, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday at our offices. And to me, the sensitivity and the nature of the meeting requires the utmost in confidentiality. And if we were to release that information to all of you, there is a great risk that, in that case, the confidentiality of the project could be lost. So there are hits that I'm willing to take to do what I think is the right thing. So my preference would be not to try to address all these issues in a public setting. If we're going to meet on the 21st, that's great. Maybe, and whether or not we get an interim contract signed, I don't know. But Chairman, just as you submitted the first contract to us, perhaps you would like to submit something as a template that you would accept. I think that would get the
It's not up
process.
to me to accept, it's up to this board to accept, so, and that's a misnomer, is that there's been many requests that you've made of me to do things for this, on behalf of this board, that's binding on this board, that is not my, this is a committee of five, this is a group of five that makes decisions and discusses it, so, it's, what we have here before us is a working template that we can work from, once we understand more about what the EDC thinks that they can provide based on, where the funding is right now. And in regards to the contract, is there any reason why that has not been signed, Mr. Day?
Well, contracts go through a long process. I guess one of the last places that go is to the county attorney. Each division that has a piece to review does that. For example, I know last week the risk manager found that we need to have a certificate of insurance on file, and he was going to contact somebody at your office.
Yeah, we have it, we sent it.
Okay.
So after everything is placed together, then Kay has that final file, and I sign it.
Okay.
But at any rate, thank you for having the discussion.
On the comment, I mean, comment on the contract thing, though, I mean, do we have, there's, put it through the hopper, and then there's getting it moved through. I mean, we're not talking about buying light bulbs here, we're talking about, the funding on an agency that is our, primary job recruiter in the county. And there's sort of some kind of sense of urgency, okay, we need this, so we're just gonna put it aside and then pick it up the next time somebody picks it up, we'll look at it. Or is there somebody, pushing that through to get it approved and get it finalized and get the stuff that's needed for it?
Well, we have the obligation to do the job whether we have a contract or not. Whether you fund us at 100% or 10%, it's still our job to do.
Is there any reason why it can't be done and probably turned around within the next week? I mean, this is Tuesday, so.
Provided everything is there and provided.
Well, how about getting back with me as to where it is in the next 24 hours? In regards to the additional funding, Commissioner Minot, is, I think that, well, Mr. Cox, when has the EDC board discussed any requests for additional fundings of the $100,000?
Well, Mr. Chairman, when the EDC board voted for full funding, $425,000, they had in mind something to do with that money.
At the time they voted on that, did they have a budget to work from?
We
A
didn't.
full budget? The EDC board, did they have a full budget to work from?
I would say certainly.
Okay. Since the funding changed and now there's a request of additional $100,000, has that been discussed by the board, to EDC board, to present to us?
Well, you should be aware that Lynn sent a memo to the EDC board last week telling the board that we were pursuing the additional funding and that if they had objections or questions, they could email or call her.
Okay. And I didn't know what if there was any questions or objections to her. Do you know anything about that?
To my knowledge, there were none.
Okay.
I asked some questions, they haven't been answered yet.
Okay.
Of me?
No.
Okay, thanks.
So in regards to any additional funding, I think first it needs to, there's a lot of things that is being asked of us independent of the EDC board. And I think it's important for the EDC board to discuss, decipher what they're going to do, number one. Number two is, because in their discussions, there's $350,000 in escrow, they have available, that are they going to use any of that money towards the $100,000 here? And again, the information that we're getting today is a little bit different than the information that was provided to us at the budget session of that position that they're now talking about funding was one they're going to cut out because the person that had it, I think, moved on to another job, and they had not funded that position since about February of this year.
March.
March.
We did not fill it anticipating a volatile budget season at the county level.
So I think what happens is the EDC board needs to discuss how best they plan on applying those monies. And then we can certainly take it up at that point in time. And I think in part and parcel with that is if before any additional funding needs to be going forward, we need to look at accountability, not only for that money, but the monies that are being asked for now. So I think it's something we can certainly look at, and I think it'd be interesting to see what the EDC board says, because I don't know if all the board members have the same opinion that it needs to be this position or should it be placed somewhere else. We don't know that. So I certainly think we need to take it up, but after we get a request from the EDC board based on their discussions.
So the memo and request from the chairman was not sufficient?
I think what Mr. Day says is he asked some questions that have not been answered. If they haven't been answered, how does the EDC's board speak as a whole without having first discussed the issues? That's what I'm trying to figure out is, has the EDC board discussed the additional funding, and has it been voted on by the EDC board?
Well,
has that been done, Mr. Cox?
I would never want to enter into a debate with you, but I would restate what I said. They approved a much larger budget when the fiscal year began. Or they anticipate, I'm sorry, they asked for full funding from the county. Now, it seems to make sense to me that if they asked for $425,000 but only got $212,000, do you think that they would say, no, we don't want the $100,000 back to fill this vacant position, to do certified sites, and to add money to our marketing and recruitment efforts? When they know those are key things that we do?
Okay. And all I'm asking is, what was the discussion as it relates to any contingency funds y'all have? What was that discussion in the EDC board?
The board?
In regards to this $100,000 request?
Well, I think the $100,000 request had nothing to do with the contingency funds. Okay. The board only voted to allocate $53,000, maybe $53,000 of the $300,000 fund balance this year. As you know, that was not my original proposal. In fact, I proposed 2 other budgets first, and the board in their wisdom said, the funding for EDC's flatline for 5 years, and we can't spend ourselves out of business in 1 year. So that's it. That's, as far as I know, that's all the board plans to take from those contingency funds.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
I don't understand your question in
I
regards
just
to...
didn't know, in regards to your request for what are we going to do about an additional funding request. This is not the time, on our work sessions, we typically do not vote on these types of issues. We vote to whether it gets placed on the agenda. If it gets placed on the agenda for our regular session, in what, is it under consent? Is it under new business? Do we have it for the September 20th meeting? Do we have it for an October meeting? Or do we just have it for general discussion and then we bring it back for the October meeting, October work session meeting, after a contract is done or after a contract is contemplated? We can do an update then. So the question is, where do we want to go? Commissioner Privet?
Mr. Chairman, is the issue before us, is this a proposed contract on page 344?
That's the old one, Commissioner. The county's, I don't know if the interim contract is actually in here, John.
344, page 344 is the contract that the EDC, that we voted on, that has not been signed, that in essence there is being operated under between now and October 31st, if I...
So the contract on 344, the current contract has not been signed?
Yes, sir. That's what we voted on August the 16th.
Right.
And that,
Hasn't been signed?
John?
sir,
Why hasn't it been signed?
that's what Mr. Day was saying is that it has been gathering all the information, whatever needs to be gathered, and it's going to be sent to Mr. Cook. And I asked Mr. Day to provide me with the status within the next 24 hours as to when it can be executed. And that contract is a contract that will be in effect until October 31st of this year. Yeah, on page 348 at the very bottom, it says that it'll be July the 1st, 2010 until October 31st. Well, this says 2011. It should read 2010 is what we voted on.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just for clarification purposes, please, if Commissioner Privet, if I understood him correctly, page 334, if that was the current contract?
344.
I'm sorry, thank you.
I believe that's the contract.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the term of this agreement shall be from July 1, 2010 to October 31st, 2011.
It's supposed to be 2010 is what we voted on.
Oh.
That's a
Mr.
Yeah, we
Chairman.
only did a 4-month contract.
Yes, sir, for us to then discuss what parameters that the new contract or a contract for the balance of the year should look like. Yeah, Commissioner Minot?
I would just like to suggest that these issues we've been talking about be discussed when you have your meeting, the chair, vice chair meeting with them, and try to be as specific as possible, because it's hard for them to fulfill what we're asking for if they don't know specifically. And I think Commissioner Cruz came up with a lot of good ideas about how they could do that. And I think get those specifically down so that they know what's expected of them as far as reporting and updating, how frequently, what form, all of those issues for their sake. Then also I would suggest that they get with their board and talk about this funding issue and see if they want to make a request and have a board approval, since that appears to be what we're requesting, is that we know that their full board approves it and come to us then, as earlier we had an issue for a request for funding. So I see those two things both not happening this a month, but taking the rest of this month to have that meeting, get those specifics together, and I'd hope that you and Commissioner Poole would share those with the rest of us so that we can add our comments or whatever and share them, and obviously they would be there so they would know what's going to be expected of them. Then if we still feel that we need it, perhaps if we agree to do some additional funding, that would be done on a quarterly basis. And we see through the next year how things are going. And that way, I think both sides would be working toward, solving some of these communications issues.
From what I heard us talk about earlier, communication, how we receive the information and how do we get the information and how quickly we can receive the information. 2 would be discussion of accountability / metrics. 3, and also in conjunction with that is the budget. The discussion, I believe Commissioner Cruz said, discussion of the budget or the idea about where we're going in the fall, so then the commissioners can have a retreat topic of the EDC at our retreat. And then 3, or the last is funding as the indexing funding that Commissioner Cruz brought up, as well as the payment of those funds on a quarterly basis from what you just mentioned. If I'm missing something, please let me know.
Yeah, I think that the idea of, like I say, getting into some kind of cycle, and that it does 2 things. One of them, it takes away we're sitting here, we're 2 months into the budget year already, and we're still discussing about the annual contract. And just like the schools bring forth to us when they bring forth a 15-year facilities plan, they present it to us in enough time so we can sit there and chew on it and look at it. I think the same thing here too. If we're asking, we get upset because we get unfunded mandates from the federal and state government. Well, when we asking the EDC to do something for us, and we tell them that we want you to do A through F, and they look at the funding and go, well, you know, we need to really look at, we need some additional funding to be able to do A through F, because if not, we're not going to be A through D. Well, it's kind of like the joke about the prize pig, that you only eat it one piece at a time. Is that if you keep cutting, if we keep looking, okay, we want you to do 3 more things, but we're reducing funding, then eventually gets to the point where then do we start saying, well, they're ineffective, not doing the job completely, totally. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. So I think that part of that discussion is on the 21st. If we have requirements that we want to see and we want to do, then there's, coming back to us would be, how much is it going to cost us, you know, to do that? And if it, you know, and that's where we, I think, tie that in, and Commissioner Minnick, to any increased funding. I think it's a good idea on the 21st that would be a part of that overall long-term contract to say, okay, we can't do that doing $212,000 a year. This is what we need to do that with. And again, going back to the 425 was back, I think, based a lot on just historical context of where we were when the county was 100% funder, which we, one time, yeah, one time we're talking about now, we do 50%. One time we were 100% the funders of EDC. I think they've done a tremendous job of getting the cities to participate and getting private investors to participate in the program. This has happened over the last 5 years. There's been a lot of hard work done to do that. So anyway.
Well, in regards to the funding or the contract, I was requesting from both Mrs. Seyfried and Mr. Cox the fact that we had to get into a contract, otherwise we can't fund them. And those, my emails and contacts were back into the end of June, 1st of July, saying the contract's expiring July 31st. We got to do something. And it took until August before we got anything from the EDC. So we will take care of this hopefully on the 21st. I'm waiting to hear from Mr. Lampy. And once I hear from Mr. Lampy as to whether or not he's available on the 21st, we can go from there. Thank you all. Why don't we do the, why don't we take a, let's see, at 6 for 5:35. Why don't we take a break until 5:45 and come back?